Thank you for everyone for joining us. This is a webinar which is in response to the situation that we all find ourselves in. Things are, as we all know, fairly slow right now, but it's a perfect time to start planning your re-entry back into business. The purpose of the webinar is intended to give you some thoughts and ideas to help you in this direction. Next. This webinar is being presented by SCORE and co-hosted by the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce with the support of all of the chambers across Cape Cod and the islands, and we thank them very much for their support. A little comment about the demographics. Somebody in the audience already asked a question about that. In the audience, we have 28 people from professional services, 18 people from retail, 15 hospitality, 10 beauty salon, 10 restaurant, 8 from the art world, and 18 general. So we've got a very good cross section of Cape Cod, so that's good. Next. Oh, so sorry, I skipped ahead. So we are funded, SCORE is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the Small Business Administration. We also receive funds from private donations, and our organization, SCORE is a national organization with about 11,000 volunteers and over 320 offices. The Cape Cod chapter itself has 50 volunteers serving all of the Cape and the islands. SCORE is dedicated to helping small business start, grow, and succeed through all the different phases of the development of their business. We offer free confidential advice via face-to-face mentoring and workshops. As you know, we're not able to do face-to-face right now. So in lieu of that, we're doing a lot of video conferences and teleconferences, and that's working out pretty well. Next. As I said, we've restricted our mentoring to video and audio. The remote mentoring is really active, and we welcome everybody to take advantage of the technology that's available to us. So if you're interested, please call us. Phone number is there on the screen, as well as our website. And actually, there's some more contact information coming up in a second. Next, which is right there. So again, our website, our email address, capecodscore@verizon.net, and the office at the phone number at our office. With regards to our website, you'll find a lot of information about the things that we offer, a lot of tools and information about COVID. You'll find information regarding the emergency loans and the benefits available to small businesses and nonprofits. So we encourage you to peruse the website for more information. Next. So as you've all been muted, you can hear us, but all of the participants have been muted. As we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I'll keep track of all those questions, and at the end, we'll try to answer as many as we can, and those that we can't, we'll cover later on when we publish a complete Q&A paper, so that you'll all have that information. We'll also be sending out a copy of the PowerPoint presentation itself. Next. So without further ado, let me introduce our three presenters. They are all certified mentors. Two, Mark Lowenstein and Mark Goldberg, were previously co-chairman of the Cape Cod chapter. The next speaker, who, as I said, is also a certified mentor, is Jim Danhauser. Jim, in addition to his mentoring, has been instrumental in our workshop series. So I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Mark, and good morning, everybody. As Mark said, my name is Jim Danhauser, and I'm very happy to be taking part in today's important webinar. What you see here is the basic outline, listing the concepts that we'll be covering today and that you should be working on as you chart your course to your business's reopening. We'll talk about the need to plan on multiple dimensions as you get ready. We'll discuss cash flow management and staffing and supply chain issues, and what should be your communication objectives for all of your relevant constituencies: employees, suppliers, customers, and creditors. We'll also talk about pivoting, considering and implementing large and small changes to your business model to achieve success in the operating environment that all of you will be facing when reopening occurs. Because one thing that all of us can be sure of is that it will not simply be business as usual when you do reopen. Things will be much different, and you'll face a host of new challenges, like limitations on capacity, requirements for physical distancing, consumer reluctance to return to old habits, and many, many other new realities that you will have to contend with. Next slide. So how do you plan? Well, the first step is to assess. Assess the state of your own business, and to the extent you can, the state of mind of your customers. Think about what is likely to be important to your customers as you reopen in the aftermath of what we have all gone through. Make a list of all of the potential barriers and misgivings that your customers may have in returning to doing business with you. And assess the financial condition of your business by preparing a cash flow forecast. And we'll touch on that in some more detail in a few minutes. With that assessment in hand, take account. What steps can you take to address those barriers that you identified in your assessment? Understand that many customers will want to see that you are taking infection concerns seriously. So figure out how to accommodate physical distancing, whether that be reduced capacity, signage, announcements, spacing, or other steps. You might, in a hair salon, for example, limit the number of customers and stylists, ban walk-ins, and require all employees to wear masks and gloves, and ask customers to do the same. And consider whether you need to implement new cleaning or disinfecting policies, move more business online, or other ways to accommodate customer concerns. And of course, you'll have to comply with all applicable federal, state, and local government requirements that you can rest assured will soon be forthcoming. As to your business's financial position, your cash forecast should tell you what your working capital needs will be, and you will need to take steps to address them. Then plan. Make changes to your business model to adapt what you do and how you do it to the new environment. Think about what your customers want or need from you that you haven't anticipated in the products or services that you currently offer, or the manner in which you offer them. These can be simple changes that improve your prospects, like a restaurant recapturing parking spaces that may not be needed and erecting platforms for new dining space, or establishing dedicated pickup areas for takeout with customer names for prepaid orders. But make that plan with the results of your assessing and accounting steps in mind. And the plan should include the staffing, training, and supply chain issues that we'll discuss later in this webinar. Once you have a plan, develop and implement a comprehensive communication strategy for all of your relevant constituencies and show that your business is being a proactive force for a safe and productive return to commerce. Next slide. Cash flow. I know, I get it. Most of you did not get into business to become controllers. But I also know that many of you are trying to figure out how your business can survive this time before business returns to some level of normalcy. So how do you do that? The answer is that you can't fly blind. You'll end up making some potentially rash and damaging choices. You need to figure out what your cash needs look like now, through reopening and beyond, so that you can make smart, informed decisions as to how you proceed. For the time being, focus on cash flow. I know you are probably all tired of hearing people say that cash is king. Well, there's a reason that's always said. It's because it's true. As I used to tell my finance team, we can survive anything so long as we don't run out of money. So where do you start? Well, you see referenced here a template that's available for you to use. The benefit of that template is that all you need to do is to enter the information and the calculations are done automatically for you. In addition, the expense categories listed in that template may help you to remember expenses that you might otherwise overlook. So when should you start? I would start now, as of May 1st. If you're an operation in some form, put in the information resulting from that and modify it as you go along. Even if you're not currently operating, you surely do have expenses that you're incurring and paying, and you should enter those so that you can see how long your cash reserves can take you. And then run a couple of versions with alternating opening dates and different levels of revenues. Essentially build a high, medium, and low expectation set so that you can see what these mean to you from a cash flow point of view. And include any outside financing that you have gotten commitments for. And remember to account for any special reopening expenses that you will have to incur, including restocking, cleaning, physical modifications to provide for physical distancing, and the like. Next slide. This should in part be based on actual history. So look at your prior year performance and adjust it as best you can to what you think you'll be doing going forward. Of course, it won't be exactly correct. No fair forecast ever is. And that is more true than ever in this uncertain environment. And you'll need to update that forecast regularly to reflect the actual experience and keep yourself well informed of your intermediate cash needs. And you might consider reviewing that forecast with someone you trust, including potentially a SCORE mentor. Now, this may seem like a fair bit of work, but one thing we do have a little bit of is time. And unless you do this, you cannot know how much, if any, cash infusion you might require until it's too late. And you cannot put yourself in a position to make intelligent decisions about what, if any, other steps you should take to reduce your expenses. Next slide. In making decisions, think about your expenses. There are those that you would bucket as things that you just must have, some that you would like to have if possible, and some that you really don't need but have crept into your operating business over time. Similarly, in payroll, look at what you absolutely must have, what's a nice to have, and what you can do without. Given all of the uncertainty surrounding the intermediate future, you should seriously consider getting rid of expenses, including payroll, that you can do without, and consider the nice to haves if you need more cash cushion. And try to get accommodations from others, like landlords, suppliers, other contracting parties and creditors, in order to afford more cushion. Then you can better understand what your cash position is and what cash infusion, if any, might be necessary to survive. Next slide. Finally, do all that you can to avoid being what I call a serial cost cutter. You see the rules of expense management here. Cut early, cut big, and cut more than you think you need to if you can. I know these things are hard. I've had to do it myself. But you need to be a leader, and you need to make these hard decisions. And then you need to sit with your team and do your best to explain your rationale and try to assure them that they do not need to worry about another shoe dropping, that you have done as much as you believe that you need to do to survive in what is likely to be a very challenging operating environment. And now I'll turn the webinar over to Mark Lowenstein.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Jim. So as Jim mentioned earlier, I mean, we were all doing business before in a certain manner. None of us obviously wanted or expected this to happen. And this is the time when you really need to rethink how you were doing business before and what ways that you were doing. Some were good, some were bad, especially in this new situation we're in. So the current business model canvas that we use, and if you've been a SCORE client of ours in previous situations, we may have worked with you on this. I mean, these are the key 9 blocks that almost every business has to deal with. And I'm not going to discuss every one in detail, but let's at least start with a couple. The one on the right, customer segments, that's the issue where you have to sit back now and think about who are your customers prior to this virus situation. What did they need and what did they want? And that turns into a value proposition. Why were they doing business with you? What was your value to them? Okay. Some things that we probably took for granted before, which were key partners, which may be people in your supply chain, some of those people may not come through this. You may have to find new supply partners. You may have to, on the sales channels, you were maybe selling mostly direct, some online, maybe no online. You have to rethink how can you restructure your business to start to adapt to this new normal. Look, we know that even when the state of Massachusetts starts to loosen the restrictions, people will not be coming back in the same manner as they were before. So this is the time for the next couple weeks that we have before things start to open up to rethink what can you do now to anticipate a slower return in people's changed behavior. We don't quite know how long it's going to take, but I think it's pretty clear to most of us, again, very dependent on the type of business you're in. Just because the Governor Baker says things can start to open up again, a lot of people may not come back in the same manner that they are. And as Jim mentioned, the last 2 blocks on cost structure and revenue, we're pretty sure that most of you will have reduced revenue streams. And you're going to also have probably some increased costs depending on your situation. So these are the things that you need to think about now to try to adjust. And also things like you may never have kept good customer list in terms of emails and how to communicate them. We will discuss that a little later in the presentation, but now's the time to start putting some of these things in place to adapt to a situation that we have very little control over. Next slide. So this is all going to come down to what's the status of your current business. I mean, we know that many of you are closed. I also know that some people are open. For instance, recently I had my septic system pumped. That was all outdoor work. In fact, the only accommodation they made outside of what would have been before was that I didn't have to sign a slip physically to do that. So the question is, and this you have to give great thought to, what degree has this impacted your business, and how are you going to deal with the opening in stages? Next slide. So, as I mentioned before, just because Governor Baker says we can start doing business again to some level, not everybody's coming back in the same way. They're still going to be concerned because the virus is still out there to some degree. We don't know how much. So everything's going to depend on customer proximity. You need to be very thoughtful about every step from when you contact the customer until you deliver the service or the goods. What's the customer proximity? How can you make customers feel like you're protecting them? And of course, you want to protect your employees, because employees are on the front lines, and that's going to be an issue for a lot of people. How are your customers' behaviors going to change? If you're doing takeout, if you're a restaurant, you're doing takeout, you may be, that's a big issue. I recently had a pizza that I picked up locally, and we called up. We parked outside, called inside, someone came in, put it in our trunk, and off we went. Okay, hopefully things will get better and people will be less concerned, but still, there will be changes in customer behavior, and it all based on physical interaction with people you are not familiar with. So, can your business adapt to social distancing? You're going to have to do more cleaning, no matter what it looks like. Example, I went to a local fish market recently. The people behind the counter were masked and gloved, okay. But even a little thing like they had the pens that you would sign the receipt with, they had a jar of clean ones and dirty ones. And after you used the pen to sign the receipt, they asked you to put the pen in the dirty one, and they were going to disinfect these. So these are things that will make a huge difference in making your customers feel more comfortable that you are watching out for them. Next slide, please. Staffing. Well, we know that there's a lot of issues going on here. We know from some people that the way the unemployment is right now, you may have trouble getting some of your lower paid staff back. They may be making more money under the current unemployment situation. J-1 visas, some of the kids who came over from other countries to work on the Cape during the summer. That's not likely to happen at this point in time. So the real question is, what staff is available? What employees, what key skills in your employees do you need now? In terms of whole or partial reimbursements for lost wages, you may have applied for a PPP loan, and that may help. You're probably going to need, again, depending on the type of business, if you have employees that can work from home, do they have all the necessary elements and equipment so they can continue to work from home? You may need other people to do more cleaning than you were doing before. The biggest key for you is to have your key employees, make them feel part of the situation. Loyalty now, by treating them with respect and as best you can, given the stresses you're under, have them feel like they are part of the team so that they can come back and help you. All right. And ultimately, we know that there are going to be new rules that you're going to have. If your employee thinks they're sick, you don't want them coming in. Whether you're going to have to take any temperatures before coming to work or not, personal decision, who knows? But clearly that if you're in a customer, close proximity type of business, you're going to need gloves, masks, and other protection to make your employees and your staff feel better. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about possible training issues here, there are probably 3 areas where you're going to have to do other training. Training in changes in operation because of the proximity issues. You're going to have your staff be much more aware of the fact that they have to be gloved or masked and to handle things in terms of cleaning and delivery of products to customer. You have to make all your staff be responsive to increased sensitivity of the customer's health concerns, whether it's perceived or real. At the moment, clients will not be coming back if they think you're not concerned about their health. And of course, ultimately, you need to have the safety of your staff as a major concern. And I'm going to turn it over back to Jim. Jim?
Thanks, Mark. Talk for a few moments about the supply chain. You need to step back and examine your supply chain to see what impact the pandemic has had on it. If you have international sourcing, has that been affected? Will shipments be able to get through customs and to you on time? If you have domestic sources, you have to think about whether you source those supplies from other states. And if you do, what's the status of openings there? The only way to really know for sure is to communicate with your suppliers, including requesting new supplies if you need them, and potentially more relaxed payment terms. If there are problems that are likely to affect your ability to have the supplies you need to operate your business when you reopen, you need to start now to try to locate new sources of supply, and ideally they would be more local, so that you can eliminate the risk of interruption in the flow of supply for the time being. Now, that may increase your expenses, but for the intermediate period of time, having local sources of supply will probably put you in much better stead than relying upon inbound supplies from international or faraway domestic markets. Next slide. Pivoting. Are there changes that you can make to your business model to enhance your prospects for success? Can you move more commerce online or allow for curbside pickup and delivery? Can you target different market segments or develop a new product? There's a professor at Harvard Business School who has been quoted as saying that small businesses are great innovators, but the successful ones grow where they are planted. That means you don't really necessarily completely change what you do, but you try to find new ways to deliver your product. Maybe you dust off some old ideas, experiment with existing strengths, and search for new customers. These do not have to be big, bold, wholesale changes, but moderate shifts in your model can deliver big results and at least help you to survive. Some examples might help. There was a bar in Michigan that was closed down, and home delivery and takeout of cocktails was not allowed. Well, they developed frozen juice cubes that allow homeowners to take it home, add alcohol, and have a cocktail. They sell out all that they can make. It's a brand new product, fundamentally related to their business. And while it doesn't do anywhere near the volume that the bar sales used to do, it has given them an inflow of revenue, which has enabled them to keep going. There was another company that was in the business of providing laundry services to Airbnb hosts. As you might imagine, that market collapsed. So they found new customers. They opened a curbside wash and fold business for seniors and those with compromised immune systems who couldn't get to laundromats. They signed up 22 clients in 2 weeks. They're now doing work for restaurants that do takeout service and need towels cleaned, and they've signed up a local limited service hotel. A whole new market segment, completely different from where they were originally intended to survive, right in their wheelhouse. And they're actually doing higher revenues now than they had originally forecast they would do with the Airbnb model. There was a spin studio that was closed. They took their bicycles, did a deep cleaning, and delivered them to some of their customers at their homes. The monthly rent the customers pay includes unlimited access to streamed classes. It's just simply a new way of delivering their existing product. Similarly, you'll hear about fitness studios and spa services that are doing things with their existing customer base online, whether that's through Facebook or some other means, staying in touch with their customers and actually delivering services, whether that be fitness classes, Zumba classes, or anything like that. So finding ways to deliver that same business they're in online to stay in touch with their customers and continue to get some level of revenue flow. There are restaurants that aren't just doing takeout. Some have started selling meal kits. There's one well-known restaurant in Chicago that has decided they're not going to reopen with dine-in customers right away. Instead, they're going to continue with the meal kit sale together with fresh produce, using the same suppliers as always, but changing the customer experience and eliminating for now the fear of exposure. You can go to the next slide, Mark. What else can people do to put idle resources to work? Well, you've got distilleries making hand sanitizer. You've got clothing companies making face masks and protective gowns, manufacturers making face shields, all ways to generate revenue in high demand areas that may enable you to put idle resources to work productively. So you need to think about the new model. How do you protect your existing revenues and create new ones? What physical accommodations can you make to make your customers and employees feel and be safer? And how else can you modify the customer experience? And remember to comply with the CDC and OSHA guidelines for protection of your employees. Fundamentally, you have to recognize that things will be very different in the new operating environment. An example, retail store curbside pickup was up over 200% in the first 20 days of April compared to the prior year. Online sales, of course, have continued to grow exponentially. These things will not go back to where they were overnight. So you need to think about how you can be a part of those trends. And then take a sanity check before launching anything. You are not looking for a sea change. You want to maximize your chances for success, driving revenue today, but building the business that you still want to be running 6 months to a year from now, achieving success where you are planted. And make sure to keep up to date with funding sources. Federal, state, and other programs are continuously emerging, and you should do your best to stay in touch with those because they may prove a valuable source of a lifeline. And now I'll turn it over to Mark Goldberg.
Okay, so we all know that communications is the critical part of interpersonal relations. And Mark and Jim have talked about who you should be communicating with. And your lenders, your creditors, your landlords, your utilities, your insurance companies certainly are people that you should have an ongoing communications with to let them know what the status of your business is and what it is that you need from them and how you can work together. As Jim mentioned, your suppliers and your lessors, and your marketing and advertising firms so that they can know where you are and what your needs are and how you can work together. You also need to communicate with your current customers. I once did a study for a company that had an inordinate number of people leave them in the current year. And so what we did is we went out and surveyed everybody that had left them for another supplier over the last 2 years. And what we found was that they left them not because of price, not because of service. They left them because they felt they were taken for granted. When things open up, you're going to want your current customers to have top of mind awareness of you, and you want them to come to you if they aren't coming to you now in some form or another. There's been a Facebook campaign by Scargo Cafe in Dennis, and it's Scargo to go. They've never been in the to-go business except if you wanted something that on your menu to go, but never as a mainstay. Curbside and takeout starting tonight. Stay tuned for more information. And this has been an ongoing communication to their current customers. How many of you are reaching out to your current customers with a postcard campaign or with a telephone campaign or an email campaign that reminds them that you're thinking of them? And finding out what are their expectations for the future? How willing will they be to come to your restaurant and dine on a patio that's a temporary at a temporary location? How willing will they be to come to your location as a retail customer? So find out what are their expectations and how do they want to interact with you. You also want to think about potential customers, because we all know demand has not decreased. People just stop buying because they're not going anyplace. Simple Signs in Yarmouth has been running a Facebook campaign to potential customers with pictures of COVID-19 oriented signage. We're open. Come see us. Curbside pickup. And also wraps on vehicles that communicate with potential customers. And most importantly, your employees. You need to make sure that you stay connected with your employees. Now, when we think about, when we think about what we're going to communicate, we need to think about the fact that our messages need to be clear, forward-thinking, honest messages that inspire. When we think about creating messages, we want to think about messages that are calm, they're reassuring, they're transparent, they're authentic, and they're thorough. So that you are having that dialogue, even at a distance, with those people that are most important to you, the people that help generate your revenue. For customers, we want to make sure that we thank them for their continuing support. The two least words in the English language are thank you. There's been a Facebook campaign by Cape Cod Beer thanking everyone who stopped by to buy a takeaway, a 4-pack. So we want to explain to them what you're doing. You want to communicate to them how it might affect them and how you want to interact with them in the future. You want to detail any changes that you're making to your business, your website, your physical alterations, your product offerings or service offerings that are new or different, and how they can interact with you. You want to share updated policies, whether it be returns or cancellations, so they know that you're thinking ahead. And you want to make sure you update ways for them to communicate with you. You want to make sure that your website is as up to date as possible so that they can look at it and see how do they communicate with you? What are you offering? How are you offering it? So that they can stay connected to you. You want to be reassuring. You're not sure what the future will bring, but you'll be there to support them. And you want to create content that is helpful. Many people in today's environment have become knowledge leaders because they're sharing their knowledge on how-tos, just not saying, hey, come buy from us, hey, stop by and for our takeaway, but they're sharing. you'll notice a lot of people are sharing recipes. They're sharing information on how-tos. So think in terms of how can you be positioned in your buyer's mind so they see no suitable substitute for you. So how do we do this? Well, we want to think in terms of social media. We want to make sure that we utilize as many of the social media communications as we can. Posting blogs, short messages, 100, 200 word messages about the business, about what you're doing, about new trends that are going on. Even some social posts, pictures of you dining at home that lets people connect with you so they remember you and you know that they are tuned in to what you're doing. You want to think about traditional media. Don't forget newspapers and radio and mailers. Traditional media, lots of people pay attention to it. Video and podcasts. Video is very important because people are tuned into what in video more so than ever before. I personally start every day with some kind of a TED Talk. Gives me some inspiration, gives me some new knowledge. And podcasts, people are listening to podcasts on their iPhones. You also want to think about written communications, handwritten notes, thanking them for their patronage in the past and looking forward to seeing them in the future. And webinars just like this. You might want to think about conducting your own webinars. But when Mark talked about the business model canvas, one of the things that he talked about was sales channels. And we want to think, where do your customers get their information? And this is something you really need to be tuned into right now, because where we get our information is very different. Many of us are watching much more television than we ever have before, so we see more ads. Many of us are reading more. Many of us are listening more. So you need to find out where your current customers and your potential customers get their information. Do they read the daily newspaper? Do they read the newspaper online? What social media do they tune into? Are they Instagram followers? Are they LinkedIn followers? Are they on Facebook? You need to understand, how did they get their information so that you can be there and communicate with them? Because now's the time to position yourself with them as you begin to plan the reopening of your business. So what's the next step? Well, the next step is a second workshop that takes the information we've talked about today, and it's going to be on May 13th at 9 o'clock. We're going to break the group into breakout groups representing the different industries and industry sectors. Right now we have 7 different sectors. As Mark Ott told you, professional service, retail, hospitality, restaurants, beauty salons, art, and there's a general category. So what we're going to have is a subject matter expert, somebody from the industry, as well as one of our SCORE volunteers to facilitate each of these breakout groups. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, what are your short-term challenges? What are your longer-term challenges that you're facing in your business? And what innovative ideas have each of you come up with that you can apply? And what policies and regulations might you incur from your towns? And what kind of plans can you make now for the reopening so that we can share ideas and maybe one of those will stick and you can apply it? So we're going to limit the seats to 7 participants per track so that everybody has a chance to talk. And the registration will open tomorrow morning, and you will have this PowerPoint presentation. So if you don't capture the website address for the registration, you'll get it before the day is over. But we look forward to having you participate in smaller groups where you can actually take what we've talked about and apply it to your business. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mark Ott. As you can tell, there are 3 Marks on this call. And take whatever questions we have, and the 3 of us will try and field them.
Okay, thanks, Mark. At this stage, we have just a couple of questions, but I think they'll generate a fair bit of discussion. The first question: have other businesses considered appointing or hiring a reopening concierge, a person who greets the customers at a safe distance with cloth, face covering, etc., to welcome and orient customers to our new protocols?
I think I can field that a little bit. I don't know that anybody has done that, but that's an outstanding idea. I have a friend that owns 7 Hallmark card shops in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Shawnee, Oklahoma, and the area. And he actually has a concierge that he started right after one of the major tornadoes a number of years ago that stopped everything in its track for almost a week. So he adopted this concept, so that when somebody came into the card and gift shop, they were welcomed, and they explained how they were functioning now in this different environment. So why not apply it to this environment? One, it makes people feel valued. And we all know that we want to feel valued, and our customers want to feel valued. So I think that's a great idea.
Okay, thanks, Mark. The next question has to do with PPP and unemployment claims. It says, we received notification that we're getting some of the PPP funds. We know this is only a stopgap. We've been able to keep our staff working virtually, but as admin, we won't be able to afford to pay for us as owners, and rent is also an issue. Going forward, after the PPP money is gone and reporting requirements have been met, will we be able to reopen our DUA claims?
Mark Lowenstein, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure actually, because, but technically, I believe that your current employees who may be under getting unemployment, they could file for unemployment because then you'll lay them off again. Can they help you out? I mean, I believe that unemployment doesn't restrict people, quote, volunteering. They just cannot be making money from another job. But it is a good question, and I must admit I'm not 100% sure of the answer. So if we can figure out who asked us the question, we'll try to see if we can do a little homework and get back to you.
Yeah, Mark, I've got the question written down. So when we summarize our Q&A and send it out, we can do a little research on that and give them some more info. Okay, another questions come in also around PPP. When must I begin spending my PPP money? Can I hold off spending it until my seasonal business picks up? This is a familiar question.
Mark, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, I believe, so Mark with a C, I believe there's a restriction. They have to have paid out all that money within an 8-week period, correct?
Right, and no later than June 30th.
Right. So basically, again, depending on when you think you're hiring your seasonal staff back, but that money's got to be distributed to those employees by the end of June. When they put this program together, from a national basis, they weren't really cognizant of the fact of places like the Cape, which has a big summer season. So it was clear to us that when this program was developed, they weren't really thinking about summer locales. So June 30th, you should have spent your money. And to go back on another question, because I've had some other clients ask, is whether you're getting an economic injury disaster loan, EIDL or PPP, our advice is in general to keep really good records. We have no idea whether there's going to be any audits or things, but it's always best to be safe and keep very clear records about where and how you've spent any of this money you're getting from the government.
To add to that, our recommendation really is open up a separate bank account, put the money in that account, and keep track of every single penny, because the 75-25 rule, 75% for salary, 25% for operating expenses, is going to be the primary determinant. We don't know what other rules and regulations are going to come down from Treasury, but that's the underlying one. And the best way to do it is have a separate account where every single penny is accounted for.
And that primary determinant is for how much of the loan will be forgiven.
Right.
And
Okay.
also, excuse me, Mark. Also be very aware from whether if you've got an EIDL or a PPP. They're very different programs. And so the PPP, if done properly, will be forgiven. The EIDL is a 30-year loan. So make sure if money's come in, you're well aware of under which program it came from. So you can plan well so you don't get yourself into a problem later on.
And if you did get a grant under the up to $10,000 grant, that is a grant.
Here's a couple of follow-up questions. First one, must I pay as many employees as last year with PPP money? I may not need as many people.
I think there's a 25% threshold where you have to be within the forgiveness guidelines. It has to be within 25%.
I agree, and I think, to be honest, I think as long as the money is paid out to employees, I don't think you're going to get into a lot of problems, but it's hard to know. The rules are still been in flux.
Okay, here's one. Do you know what the interest will be? What the interest rate will be on IDLs?
3.75 for-profit businesses, and I believe 2.75 for
Right.
any nonprofits that got idle loans.
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay, next question. Self-employed. My business involves more than 10 people participating. I operate tours to shows, museums, and more. Seniors are my clients. All refunds, no revenue, trying to maintain. Not sure what the question is. Operating. Yeah, so whoever submitted that question, if you could clarify, that would be helpful. And if so, then we can come back to your
Yeah,
question.
Karen submitted that.
Yeah. Here we go. If you receive both the grant and PPP loan, does it roll together?
So the grant would be under the EIDL program. And I don't know, does anybody?
No, the grant is the grant, and the PPP is separate.
Right. The fundamental purpose of the PPP was to keep people from being unemployed or going on unemployment, to keep the people employed. The EIDL is basically has a much broader range of what you could use it for to support the business, pay bills, rents, other things beyond payroll.
Here's a good question. Can I ask customers to leave the store if I feel that they're not being careful or if they have a cough?
I think one of the guidelines, this is one of the guidelines that I've read, is that it's important for you to post what your policies are relative to customer and employee safety. And if you believe that one of the issues you're going to face is can you ask somebody to leave if they have an incessant cough and it's posted, then you can refer to that and that will help you stay out of some discriminatory trouble. But it's very clear that posting what your policies are very important.
I would add that you may want to avoid having your employees become the enforcers, because there have been in other parts of the country certain pushback from customers. Posting the rules, as Mark says, in very clear language. Consider if you have a sound system, making periodic announcements. And if you feel personally that somebody is just flat out in violation, you can ask them to leave so long as those policies are posted. But be careful to not allow it to become a confrontational situation.
Okay. A reopening question. As we begin reopening, can we bring some employees back but have others continue working remotely?
It seems to me if you're
Sure.
paying both, it doesn't matter.
The answer is absolutely you can.
Yeah.
So long as it's not in any way discriminatory, you're not paying people differently. If you are, then you have to consider compliance with all of the relevant labor rules. But there is no reason that you can't have certain people working remotely and certain people working in your facility.
Okay, next question. Do you know if local chambers will be stocking masks and gloves for purchase by merchants?
I think you need to ask your local chamber. We haven't heard that yet.
Okay, next. I understood that the $10,000 was part of the PPP. Is that correct?
No. The $10,000 up to $10,000 grant is part of the EIDL program, the SBA's Emergency Injury Disaster Loan Program.
Next question. Fortunately, we received the PPP loan and also applied for the EIDL loan, but have heard nothing yet. Are they still processing the EIDL loans? And is there anything I can do to facilitate it further?
Well, there's nothing you can do to facilitate. The only thing you can do is to try to see if you can get a status on your EIDL loan. We've got a lot of questions on that recently. And the word we got from Bob Nelson, who's the head of the Massachusetts SBA, is there is an 800 line out there. And we've been told, and I cannot verify this 100%, but if you call and ask for your EIDL status, A, you need your application number, and B, you should ask for what they call a Tier 2 representative. I guess the standard person who answers the phone may not have the ability to tell you your status, but theoretically, if you ask for a Tier 2 representative, they may be able to tell you what status your EIDL loan is in at the moment. I've gotten mixed responses from the clients we've talked to. Some have gotten information, and some have been on hold for an hour or two. So that's the best I can tell you at this point.
And the telephone number is 1-800.
The portal is closed, incidentally, for any new EIDL applications for the time being.
Right. The 800 number is 800-659-2955. 1-800-659-2955.
And again, for those of you who are wondering why we can't give you some exact answers on some of these things, it's because the information that we've gotten hasn't been all that clear in a few areas.
All right,
Mark.
Next one. How does one know if the EIDL is a loan or a grant? I filled out the online application and money was deposited in my account.
My experience is that's a grant. You actually sign loan agreements with for the EIDL loan. If money appears, that's most likely the grant portion. And it was planned that way, so it got to you faster.
Right. The SBA ultimately will catch up with any loan documents because the EIDL is a loan, which means it's got to be repaid, and they're going to make you sign documents to verify that versus the PPP, which is the only thing that we believe may happen is they may come back and audit certain people to make sure the money's been spent properly.
All right. Since they base PPP loan on payroll, 2019 payroll, what if you have less employees because an employee has quit? Can the payroll go to a new person that wasn't previously on your payroll?
Yes.
Right. It's not based on the individuals because they don't know who the individual. You more than likely only showed them your payroll records. They're not going to be concerned whether it was Mary or Joe. They're just going to be concerned that the money is appropriated to keep people off unemployment and employed. That's the basic intent.
All right. Next PPP question. Our PPP funds came in mid-payroll, so the 8-week time period ends mid-payroll. Our plan is to run an extra 1-week payroll. Can we include the entire week or just the days within the 8 weeks?
Not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I would say that it should be within the 8 weeks from the origination of the loan. But my suggestion is that you check with your banker because they're the ones that are going to be the first line of review.
And if nothing else, if you can't get an answer from your banker, I would frankly make an advance payment for the week ahead, telling your employees I'm kind of prepaying you ahead, and that way you've dispersed the funds before the deadline possibly.
Next question. Is idle money in addition to PPP money?
You can get both, but you can't get more than 2 PPP loans, more than 1 PPP loan.
And you may want to roll the idle loan into the PPP loan. It all depends upon what term you want the loan to be and what interest rate you are prepared to pay on it.
Next question. I recently received an email stating that our idle is in process, but will take a while due to the backup.
That's not a surprise. Well, what is a surprise is they sent you an email. But what's not a surprise is that they're backed up because they had a huge amount of people. The SBA doesn't usually deal with this kind of volume, and so it's clear that they were backed up. But I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised that they sent you an email giving you a status.
All right, this one's a long question. Rather than read the whole question, I think I'll kind of see if I can just kind of put a point on it. I don't know if we can answer it because it's trying to explain why the government does something. But here we go. Why does the government put the June 30th spending limit on an act that allows you to apply until June 30th?
Well, I'm afraid I can't answer to the logic of the
I
government.
think we need to pass on that.
I think Mark's characterization was correct.
So Mark, why don't we take the remaining questions and we will go through them and we'll apply answers to them. And when we send out the PowerPoint, we will answer as many of the questions as we can that we did not answer on the phone. Does that work?